God, are you there? It's me, in the denim jacket. Yeah, as many of you longtime viewers of the show could have probably guessed, I love Propagandhi. Man, this band is so up my alley, they should just have a picture of my big, stupid face as their mascot. Yeah, I do genuinely love this band. Fucking Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes is a modern classic, and I legit don't think these guys have stumbled yet. In a weird way, these guys are kind of like the punk rock version of the Tragically Hip. They've got crazily skilled chops behind their instruments, they're completely unafraid to tackle whatever the bloody hell they want to in their lyrics, and they're another band from Canada that deserves way more attention than they usually get. But yeah, this is a real masterclass punk act, and Victory Lap? Jesus, for most any other band, that would be a cocky as fuck thing to call an album. But Prop? They've definitely earned it. This album is a victory lap. It's probably the best punk album I've heard all year, and no, I do not say that lightly. One thing I adore about this band is just how not punk they can be at times. Yeah, this still has all the ferociousness, speed, and intensity that a punk crowd would expect and vibe off of, but the absolute insane riffage, the thick, stampeding bass work, the drums that cascade across every tom, cymbal, and pedal like mania. It's almost metal in certain ways. Like, this is a punk band you could possibly play for your, well, at least more open-minded metalhead friends, as an introduction to the punk genre. Stuff like the title track, When All Your Fears Collide, and Failed Imagineer absolutely punish you with insane licks and slamming beats. I mean, Jesus, that bass line in the verses of Failed Imagineer makes me frickin' moist. And the title track, well, we've all heard a frontman throw it off to the guitarist for a solo. But how often do we see that for the drummer? Stop! Fuck, I love that shit. But at the same time, this is still punk. Like, genuinely punk. Through and through. Ain't nobody gonna mistake this for anything else. Comply Resist, Cop Just Out of Frame, In Flagrante Delicto, Wishing, and Beyond are absolute pit ragers. Hell, Wishing and Beyond sounds straight up Bad Religion. And y'all know I'm gonna be all over that. Yeah, these guys' heavy game is absolutely Wu-Tang. It ain't nothing to fuck with. This album will keep your head banging so hard, I recommend avoiding all pretense and just buying the neck brace along with the CD. And these guys could easily just live off of their heavy shit if they wanted to, but the thing is, they don't. They love getting experimental, and occasionally trippy at times. A song like Lower Order, for example, it starts out like it's gonna stomp the fuck out of you, kinda like Metallica's Don't Tread on Me. It's big and menacing and imposing, but just as you think it's about to crush your skull, it swerves into a glitter guitar little number about how the lead singer became a vegan. It's weird, and you don't see it coming, but God, I still love it. And Negredo is a little mid-tempo number that is elevated by just being all drums. It's like all drums. It's all drums. Legit, drummers, listen to this song and become moist. It's a sad but still wonderful little tune about alcoholism, the dangers it inflicts upon yourself and your family, and self-projection as interpreted through Jungian psychology. See nothing more? If you want to do Jung, this is how you motherfucking do Jung. God damn, it's beautiful. I guess I do kind of have to throw out the usual, hey, if you don't like really left-wing politics, this maybe won't be your thing, disclaimer, but man, do not let that alone keep you away from the album. Hell, even I don't agree with everything that they're saying on this album. Look, as much as I love Lower Order, I just don't feel like that much of a piece of shit when I eat a hamburger, you know? I mean, at least not for those reasons. The thing is, even if it's a bit preachy, the music, oh sweet Jesus, the music, it's so good, it makes up for any potential shortcomings the album may have for you. This is an easy 5 in my book, and yeah, be on the lookout for this thing to be on my best of the year list. High. Victory Lap gets 5 pissed off Don Cherries out of 5. Man, I got a decent amount of flack for never covering Like Clockwork back when it dropped way back when. Hey, I regret it, but in the early days of the channel, I just never had time to get around to it. But the more I look back on it, the more I'm kind of grateful I never got around to touching on it, because guys, can I tell you a little secret? I wasn't really a huge fan of that album. Oh god, I mean, yeah, My God is the Sun, it totally rages, I Sat by the Ocean is a gorgeous head trip, and it closes pretty strong with I Appear Missing and its title track. Yeah, it's not a bad album, but overall, I just wasn't as impressed with that thing as everyone else seemed to be. It was album of the year material for most everyone I talked to about it, but for me, light 4, strong 3.5? It's just not their best work. It was kind of hit or miss for me. Then again, I'm somewhat of a classic Queens snob. My Queens of the Stone Age is more rated R, songs for the deaf. You know, that brand of rocket-fueled crunch rock they put out in the early 2000s. It was just unmatchable in my book. Songs for the Deaf is one of those albums I would say comes damn near close to perfection. It's so good. Hell, I'm even a bit more lax on some of the more controversial albums in their catalog, like Lullabies to Paralyze and Era Vulgaris. Fuck, everybody seems to hate Era Vulgaris for some stupid reason, but I love the shit out of that album. But Like Clockwork really had its moments where it deviated from the heavy rock mood, and it tried more experimental stuff, more heady stuff whenever it could. As a result, I had a hard time getting into it, at least as hard as I would for most other Queens material. I was kind of hoping for a more back-to-basics sound on Villains, but instead they've kind of doubled down on the experimental vibe. That makes it sound weird when I put it that way. Not that a band shouldn't experiment and try out new stuff, no, but the Queens, they just weren't winning me over here with some of the directions they took on this album. The old school 50s rock swing of The Way You Used to Do just came off as kind of corny to me. And if anybody should be able to pull off that sound, you'd think it would be Josh Homme and company, right? Not really. The more psychedelic vibes of Fortress and Unreborn Again try to come off with a hallucinogenic majesty, but to me they came off more like weak pot brownies at a mediocre house party. I just wasn't feeling it. And Villains of Circumstance, as far as closers go, it ain't no Like Clockwork, let me tell ya. I mean, don't get me wrong, people. I didn't despise this album. It has plenty of strong tracks. Head Like a Haunted House does have a touch of that old school heavy and fast style that I'd love to hear from this group. And the opener, Feet Don't Fail Me, is a wonderful little funk-sounding track. Honestly, I wouldn't mind hearing more like that from these guys. If they're gonna experiment, hey, pour on the funk. I'm all for this. But even here, the songs I dug, I didn't full-blown adore, really? I mean, for all the things that bugged me about Like Clockwork, I still adore My God is the Sun, I Sat by the Ocean, and I'm willing to slog through the lesser parts of that album to get to the stuff that's good. This thing, I don't know, overall I just felt less enthused about it. I don't know, again, this just has to be my specific taste in the band getting in the way of things a bit. I mean, nothing on this album is full-blown awful or anything. Performances and general song construction is still fine, great even. I can understand why this album is getting so much love, but it just kinda isn't my thing. Again, I think it's just more of a me problem, but I don't know. I got a version of Quotza that I absolutely love, and this does not sound much like that. This may be an album that won't do too much for you, but if you heard the singles and dug them, yeah, this is still a safe bet. Go for it. She's a pretty gal, for sure. She's just not my type, I guess. Villains gets 3.5 Eyes of the Beholder out of 5. Oh, the National is back. Yay! Well, I guess they never really went anywhere technically, but it has been about 4 years since Trouble Will Find Me, and I was starting to get a wee bit antsy. See, I'm a big National fan. High Violet and Boxer are absolutely spellbinding works of gleeful moroseness, and No, that isn't an oxymoron. Listen to those albums, you'll probably say the same thing. And they're another one of those bands that have never full-blown disappointed me yet, and I'm happy to report that Sleep Well Beast keeps its streak alive. It's pretty damn good. See, the thing I love about The National is that they're totally inspired by the likes of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Tom Waits, Joy Division, and all that super moody post-punk that's pitch black, without feeling the need to express their brand of moroseness and absolute sorrow through eyeliner. Unlike certain other bands I've heard this year, they're able to draw a lot of inspiration from Nick Cave without just full-blown ripping him off, you know? The National has their own unique identity and sound, and that's pulled off mostly by their absolutely stellar and deceptively complex instrumentation. Vocalist Matt Berenger has that deliciously sleepy-sounding low-bass vocal technique that guys like Ian Curtis and Daddy Nick himself made so popular, and they absolutely color their music with airy, subtle guitar work and mellow, humming synth work. This band creates atmosphere in the same way trees produce oxygen. It just comes very, very naturally to them. But the real thing that hooks you in about their music is their stellar and criminally underrated rhythm section. Brothers Brian and Scott Devendorf really make this band what it is. Scott's bass work, while pushed a little in the back for this album, weirdly enough, is still menacingly deep and rich. He's not afraid to go outside of the bounds of what the melody would call for, and he knows how to use his instrument to accentuate all of the more subtle melodic elements, in addition to being able to take center stage when he has to give the song a good push for a chorus or a closer, etc. And Brian's drums, why doesn't this guy get more recognition? The dude is absolutely flying off of his kit in nearly every song. Brian's drumming style is weirdly peppy and energetic. He almost sounds like he's going full Travis Barker. It's a formula that sounds like it should be a disaster on paper, but Brian hammers things out with such skill and precision that instead of failing, this becomes the band's biggest asset. A big part of what makes The National stand out is their exquisite drum work, and on Sleep Well Beast, that tradition continues in stride. Really, I don't have too much negative to say about this album. I guess that its only shortcomings are that A, The National just isn't gonna be a band that's for absolutely everybody, as bands like this often are, but even then, I can say that if something like Protomartyr was a little too banana bonkers for your tastes, The National is a bit more user-friendly, and it'll go down a lot more smoothly. And B, I guess this isn't their best album by any means. It's not quite on par with the likes of High Violet or Boxer, but then again, those albums are, like, next to impossible to top. I think I like this album a bit more than Trouble Will Find Me, though. It's more of a full-blown atmospheric sorrow fest. It's a bit more of a getting back to basics album for these guys, I think, but still, it's solid. If you wanted to give The National a try, you could start here if you wanted to. I'd recommend Boxer or High Violet, but you won't be swayed away from this band or anything. It's a solid outing by a solid band. Give it a try if you need a good cry. Sleep Well Beast gets 4.5 Portal 2s out of 5. If I may quote from the legendary Hayao Miyazaki, the Black Keys were a mistake. Yeah, the White Stripes deserve their place in history, and even the Keys themselves were cute at first, but holy shit, their bag of tricks ran out super quick, and they just kept going and going and going and going. And now the whole garage rock duo thing has gotten so out of hand, there's a whole scene of bands where two random hipsters decide that the old school blues is like the coolest thing ever, man. So they buy a drum kit and a fuck ton of distortion pedals, and now your one friend who wears a scarf everywhere he goes has another mediocre band to torture your ass with. Ugh. Thankfully though, what I've heard from Death From Above, no 1979 for this album, I don't know, just go with it, usually tends to be a bit better than most of the other slosh I hear from this scene. For one thing, they can play a lot better than most of these bands can. Sebastian Granger is a pretty good drummer, all things considered, and Jesse Keeler is so good at playing and properly fuzzing out his bass that Up until someone pointed it out in my Royal Blood review, I honestly thought he was just playing a regular 6-string. Yeah, not one of my prouder moments, people. That's why you always do your research first. And Outrage is pretty good, I guess. They mix up their usual formula here and there on songs like the title track and Freeze Me by incorporating some synths. A third instrument? Oh my god, be careful guys, one more instrument and your snobby indie cred will go flying out the window. And the general punch and liveliness that I do enjoy about this band hasn't gone anywhere. That's one thing I do like about DFA. They aren't as bothered about letting their blues influences show here. This is more of a pure driven rock experience. Again, not that I hate the blues, I love the blues, but look, so many other bands in this scene just ape the whole lo-fi blues rock aesthetic. You almost physically can see Jack White's mushroom stamp plastered across their faces. It's really bad across this scene. It's always nice to see a power duo strive to make their own sound and forge their own unique identity. We don't need another copycat, Jesus. But again, like I said on my Royal Blood review, I'm just not a huge fan of this genre in general. Honestly, the album's okay, but I don't adore it. It's better than anything the Keys have put out in the last 5 to 8 years or so. But hell, this isn't even my favorite power duo album from this year. Have you heard the new Japan Droids? Go give that a spin and you'll forget about this album right quickly. It's not bad for what it is, but it is still a Death from Above album, regardless of whether the 1979 is there or not. If you've heard any other Death from Above album, you've kinda heard this one already, and most things you either like or dislike about this band haven't gone anywhere or changed all that much. I'm sure fans of this band have already creamed several pairs of jeans over this, but to those of you that aren't as into them, you're not missing out on too much if you want to skip it. Again, I'd point you towards that new Japan Droids over this, personally. It's way, way good. This is just okay. Outrage is now gets 3.5 misplaced exclamation points out of 5. Fuck, the new Trivium is so banger. It's so banger. It's so banger. Oh, plop this bad boy into some mash because this album is nothing but bangers. Oh, but hell, I knew it was gonna be. I've loved this band for years. I loved them in the beginning, and I've loved them pretty much straight up to now. And yeah, it hasn't been all giggles. I, for one, have just never jumped on the whole Trivium hate train that seems to have been chugging along for the past few years. Trivium is so mainstream, so poserific. They're just playing all these melodies and clean shit that everyone wants to hear. It's not real metal. Wait, you mean to tell me a band that plays music for a living wants to make music? Wait, stop me. That's pleasant to listen to? Perish the thought! A band that's good and makes good music is enjoying a lot of success? Oh, legit metal warriors, we cannot let this be! Rise up, oh miscreants, and defend our true, precious cult meter! Like, I'm half tempted to dump a fuck ton of money into Jim Sterling's Patreon and beg him to do a commentocracy on whiny-ass true metal bitch boys, because the rampaging petulance I've seen smacking this band would be a literal gold mine for the guy if he chose to go after it. Hell, if I had the time, I'd don the powdered wig myself and give it a go. Does Royston do freelance work, Jim? I don't know, drop me a line. Anyway, look, Trivium does not deserve the hate they get. Trivium has always had to face a certain amount of shit from the metal community for either being too mainstream or not metal enough or blah blah bliggerty blah. And on this album, it feels like they stored up all that resentment, spalled it all up nice and tight, and just fastballed it right back into the naysayers' faces. Oh, guys, from the title track all the way down to Thrown into the Fire, this album never ever lets up the assault. The guitar melodies and harmonies are absolutely heart-stopping. This album is shreddy as hell, and if you're the type that comes to this band for their solo work, you are in for a real treat. Matt Heafy delivers some excellent vocal performances and really cuts loose with his screaming here, something he hasn't been doing a ton of lately, one of the many reasons this band tends to get blowback. But here, Man, he's got nothing but venom to spit, and it's all thick, syrupy, and delectable. This album is basically super concentrated Trivium. This is the Trivium album you get when you put all of Trivium's other albums into a blender, sans that one you don't like to talk about, hit frappe, and garnish it with a ton of kick-ass. I mean, I don't know, I've always been a big Trivium fan, so maybe I'm letting bias get in the way a little bit just on this one. But man, none of the other critics seem to disagree with me this time out, so hey, it's nice we can all see eye to eye for a change. This album kicks ass. Seriously, this is one of the best metal releases of the year. It's loud, it's skillfully played, it's intense, it's provoking, and if you're into any kind of metal, you need to at least give this thing a try. Fucking take the blackened silver spoon out of your shitty elitist mouth for 5 goddamn seconds and give this album a spin. You might actually like it. The Sin in the Sentence gets 5 Roystons out of 5. Oh boy, Stone Sour. This'll be an interesting one. I've been a fan of this band ever since the very, very beginning. I heard them way back on their debut on the first Raimi Spider-Man soundtrack, and for all that soundtrack's crimes, Bother was a real highlight of that album. These guys would go on to totally kick ass on albums like Come Whatever May and Audio Secrecy. They fielded a decent amount of "lol, Slipknot light" comments along the way, and I'm sure in some circles they still do, but man, that shit ain't founded. If you can just separate your mind from Corey Taylor's other gig for 5 seconds, you'll find a lot to enjoy here. Slipknot is pure metal, sheer raw aggression, while this band feels a bit more traditional. That's kind of what I liked about this group. It gave Corey a chance to write from a place other than and let him flex his muscles a bit more and try new things. Whereas people have certain expectations for Corey's work in Slipknot, with this project, he's welcome to do whatever the hell he wants. In the hands of some, that's a recipe for disaster, but Corey has gone on to prove that he can totally handle his own rodeo without drowning the rest of us in too much bullshit. But on this album, just a fair warning, it takes a few hard right turns here and there. See, one thing that might be a turnoff to some right out of the gate, mainly in that it's not taking itself very seriously. Like, at all. The album opens by calling you a bastard and saying you suck in full, and immediately jumps into a song called Taipei Person Alati. Look, just say that phrase a few times fast, you'll get it. Yeah, get it now? Yeah, oh, boo, boo! Hydrograd, more like Hydrodad. Puns. Hydrodad puns. I hope you're hydro glad, Corey Taylor. You've made me hydro sad. And with songs like Knievel Has Landed, Fabulous, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Rose Red, Violet Blue, or This Song Is So Dumb and So Am I, these don't sound like your typical Stone Sour tracks, do they? Hell, they sound more like they should be off of the Primus album that we sadly didn't get. Okay, but here's the thing. All those songs that I mentioned, as goofy as they are in name, and sometimes in lyrics even, they're all still pretty kick-ass. The instrumentation is still loud and vivid, and Corey Taylor still has a shriek that's 24 karat gold. It's still definitely a Stone Sour album. It's just really taking the piss. It's different for sure, at least in mood and tone, but hell, the music is still really good, so who gives a shit? Honestly, I think I can understand why Taylor and company would want to take such a drastic tonal shift, especially since the ridiculously heavy, dark, and bleak House of Gold and Bones albums. That concept was really weighty, really heavy, and occasionally it would disappear up its own ass at times. I'm sorry, Corey, I'm just being honest. I hope we're still Twitter buds, dude. But hell, after 2 albums that heavy, dark, and imposing, 3 if you want to throw the last Slipknot in there too, I can understand why you just want to lighten the fuck up a little, you know? I get it. I can see exactly where the band is coming from here, and I don't necessarily mind the shift, though it is kind of a drastic one. It might set some people off, is all I'm saying. And would I say this is their best work? Well, no, like House and Golden Bone, it's still a little longer than it really should be. Some of the tracks kinda don't go anywhere, and the country song, Saint Marie, is like really country. It's like 90% slide guitar, and I fucking hate slide guitars, so yeah, no points in my book. But hey, it's still a good-ass Stone Sour record, and it shows us that this band doesn't always have to pile on the drama to still make compelling music. They can lighten the fuck up and just make a good record when they want to. Look, all I'm saying is next time chill on the dad puns a little, my man. Just a little. I don't know, my 2 cents. Hydrograd gets 4 Taipei persons out of 5 Alatees. Or hot water music? Oh my god, yes! Oh, excuse me while I squee. I'm gonna squee. I'm sorry, but I need to squee. Okay, there, it's out of my system. Oh, goddamn, do I love this band. I am so glad they got back together to bring us Exister back in 2012. Exister was so goddamn good. Drag My Body, Mainline, State of Grace. Oh, that album was way better than it had any right to be. But then again, hot water music is masterclass when it comes to punk. Chuck Reagan and Chris Wallard are just killer guitarists and singers with that kind of throaty, casket-aged vocal style that is pure grit, rawness, and unfettered power. Listening to this, or most hot water music, past their early emo punkier days, will straight up grow hair on your chest, a beard on your face, and another beard on your beard, and a beard on your chest. It's just so fucking grizzled. And this album continues their awesome legacy with some damn fine anthematic pit jams. The title track is a stampeding, old-fashioned 3-chord punk club over the head. Never Going Back is something that's gonna absolutely rage at their live shows, and Vultures and Bury Your Idols showcase just how good these guys are at writing passionate, thoughtful lyrics that can keep you singing along for the entire night. God diggity damn did I like this album. I really liked this album. But as I was listening to it, I kept getting this weird, nagging feeling in the back of my head. It was one of those things I sometimes have trouble listening to, and that some people in my audience swear I straight up don't have. It was my conscience. I was having a good time, and I was ready to slap a 5-star rating all over this album, but my conscience just had to barge its bloody head in the door, didn't it? Crash, it told me, you know for a fact you don't like this album that much. It has plenty of good features and lots of great songs, but you know damn well this isn't album of the year material, and I'm going to make you admit it. Oh, I fought that prick off for as long as I could, but eventually, like I always do, I broke down. Yes, the album does have some flaws. Minor ones, I promise. Really, this is a very good hot water music album. But that's kinda all I can say about it. I mean, if you've spent any real time with, say, Caution, Exister, the new What Next, then you really know what you're in for here. It doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything. And while yes, Never Going Back and Vultures are slamming, they aren't godlike in the way that Drag My Body or Trusty Chords are, and the album does have a few songs that do kinda just feel like filler. Not many, but stuff like Rabbit Key and Hold Out didn't exactly take me out to a fancy dinner and call me again the next day, you know? All in all, it's just a really good hot water music album. Not much more or less, but god damn it, Conscience, that is not a bad thing. Given the high quality of music these guys have given us over the years, it's safe to hold these guys to a very high standard for punk rock. And yeah, they've totally met that standard again with this one. Is it an Exister or a Caution? No, but it's still a ridiculously solid and well-built record. Not every car has to be a Lamborghini, Conscience. There's nothing wrong with a good old Dodge pickup, especially when she runs this damn fine. And no, while it may not be album of the year material, I still might have a place for this in the honorable mentions, and I'm still gonna recommend the fuck out of it to my audience, so you can just suck it, Conscience. Now get out of here, I have 5 more albums to review. Light It Up gets 4.5 Dodge Rams out of 5. Hey, Conscience, why aren't you bugging me about this album? Because we actually both agree it's kinda bullshit. Okie dokie, good to know. Yeah, people, let me lay my cards out really early for this one. I am not a fan of the direction these guys chose to go on Going Gray. I was a huge fan of their last album, Back on Top. That made my album of the year list back in 2015, and my opinions haven't soured on it. It was an acoustic, jammy piece of rock and roll snideness that dripped with vitriol, sarcasm, and just a giddy kind of derpiness. This was a group that was wholeheartedly taking the piss, but the quality of their music and their ever-present charm made you not mind any of that. It was all very stellar. But this thing, hoo boy, they have made some changes. Keyboards, keyboards, keyboards is the name of the game here. And not that they haven't used them before, but holy shit, they have gone absolutely overboard with them on this thing. This album is all about creating a more chill, a more relaxed, a more subdued, atmospheric kind of vibe. And if we learned anything from Pacific Daydream, it's that just because the band is relaxed doesn't mean we are. The guitar work, which was such a giant giddy treat on the last few albums, has been dialed back a lot to fit for this new mood they're trying to create. Even when they do bring in the guitars, they're often way too oversaturated with chorus and reverb effects to land any real punches like they did on the last album. Yeah, I know they aren't going for punchy here, but their take on relaxing is just rather boring, if I can be honest. The music here just isn't all that well arranged or compelling, and Brian Sella's vocals really kinda don't match with this album's mood. Again, the dude's voice is dripping with sarcasm, with slyness, with a kinda tee-hee ain't I a stinker kind of mentality, but given the music he's working against here, that kind of style just doesn't seem to fit the mood. So more often than not, he's either singing in his old school way and having it result in some really prominent theme clashing, or he's purposefully kneecapping his delivery just to fit the tone of the song, and he just doesn't sound very good in that mode. I'm sorry. Overall, yeah, I was kind of disappointed with this thing, but I can say that kinda disappointed is as far as it goes. I mean, is it awful or unlistenable? No, hell no. I mean, Peace Sign, Bay, Don't Fill Up on Chips, songs like those have just enough traces of their old sound to make me still enjoy them, and the things that still make this band unique and fun are still in there. They're just buried underneath way too many Casios and chorus pedals. The band is still recognizable as themselves. They've just kinda put on an ugly sweater, and they need to change out of it soon. I wasn't appalled by this thing, but be warned, it took several listens to even come close to warming up to it. This thing originally kinda made my skin crawl. It's a very castrated sounding Front Bottoms album, but after a few weeks of sitting with it, I've kinda made my peace with it a bit. This thing isn't wretched, but it just feels like I ordered steak and the band brought me soup. It wasn't what I was expecting. It's still palatable though, I guess. Just, look, next time bring me a goddamn steak, alright? Going Gray gets 3 ugly sweaters out of 5. Guys, can I be a little real with you? After I heard AFI's last album, this thing had me scared shitless. In case you haven't heard, Dreamcar is a collaboration between Davey Havok of AFI and the non-Hollaback members of No Doubt. Sounds like an interesting pairing, doesn't it? Well, like I said, after AFI face-planted on their last album, this one had me super worried. It also got me thinking about that last No Doubt record too, and yeah, that wasn't exactly peaches either. Given both these acts have had trouble with focus in their most recent efforts, and the fact that this is a side project to add on top of that, ooh, this had the potential to be a real disaster. Thankfully though, that did not happen. Hell, this album's pretty good. But, oh, how to describe it? It has all the pop-tastic bliss of No Doubt's instrumentation, blended with Davey's high-register, high-polished approach to vocals. He leaves a lot of his extremist, burials, etc. delivery at the door. Hey, just like the Blood album, am I right? But the weird twist with this record is that Well, Davey and the gang are on full-blown pop mode for their performances, but Davey's lyrical style hasn't changed. That means the lyrics are all dark, gothic, and crazy moody. It's songs about murder, death, and depression. But in a bright neon jacket and cool sunglasses, it sounds like Neon Trees if they were going through a really prominent goth phase. It's kinda brilliant. Seriously, this album gets really poppy too. After I Confessed is like a darker, moodier version of a Duran Duran track. Kill for Candy is like The Cure, all hulked out and angry, and All the Dead Girls is seriously an alkaline trio song by way of freaking Wham. And believe it or not, all of this is really, really goddamn sweet. Like I said, Davey's on full pop mode here, and his high register and swoony, swaggery delivery plays really well to the rest of the band's pop music strengths. Davey seems to understand what he needs to do to fit in with the No Doubt guys, and the No Doubt guys seem to understand how to best accentuate Davey's strengths. Adrian Young's drumming is bouncy and vivaciously playful. Tony Kanal's trademark bass is super thumpy and funky. He's always reminded me of a lighter version of Flea in several ways, and to hear that kind of low ending on an album like this, it just fits super well. And his accompanying keyboard work, mixed superbly with Tom DeMont's bright and colorful guitars, make this a melodious and rhythmic dream to listen to. It's a weird mix of colorful blackness that intrigues the hell out of you and really does do a good job of mellowing you the hell out. Hey Weezer, front bottoms, you want to chill the fuck out? This is how you do it, okay? I get how this might not be everyone's thing, though. I feel like No Doubt fans might get spooked by Davey's more macabre nature, and AFI fans might get a little bored by No Doubt's lack of distortion. But speaking as a fan of both, this is a cocktail that really, really does go down smooth. It's a kooky, wonderful little experiment that maybe shouldn't have worked, but totally did. And I really, really want to give them props for that. Plus, this album being good does give me a teensy-weensy bit more hope for that next AFI record. Just, you know, I'm still crossing my fingers there on that one. Dreamcar's pretty good, though. I like it. Dreamcar gets 4.5 killer candies out of 5. So, I'm supposed to hate this thing, right? From what I've seen from other reviews, this album is the reason cancer exists, and it's the reason we can't have nice things, and oh my god, Crash, this thing did horrible things to my ears, and we should all file charges and sue this band for being bad and making me listen to a bad thing. It is bad. You're with us, right, Crash? You're with us, dude. This album is a suck, right? This album is a suck, right, Crash, right? No. No, I'm not with you. Sorry? I thought the album was okay. But look, I 100% get why you're upset, okay? Wow, talk about a departure. I was a pretty big fan of Sleeping with Sirens' last album, Madness. It was melodic hardcore that borrowed a good deal from pop punk, and Kellen Quinn's uniquely high voice gave it a certain flavor that made everything very appealing, if not out of place feeling. Look, pop punk artists tend to sing on the high end, but god damn, Kellen could apply to be one of Alvin's Chipmunks, and they wouldn't even need to pitch shift him to get the effect. But this album, it's not melodic hardcore, it's not even really pop punk. This album is very, very straight up pop. Songs like Legends, Trouble, and Hole in My Heart could honestly work as well for, say, Rihanna, Katy Perry, or Taylor Swift than they could Sleeping with Sirens, really. Well, maybe not Taylor Swift. I don't know what the hell's going on with her right now. But yeah, to say this album is a change of pace is the understatement of the year. I call this a change of pace in the same way that the Titanic hitting the iceberg was a change of pace. But I don't hate it. Yeah, it's different, but the band actually kind of does the whole straight up pop thing fairly well. Kellen's voice sounds way more appropriate in this kind of setting. It just does. He's still doing a good job at selling the songs he's singing, even if the aggro has been cut way down for this affair. And instrumentally, I mean, yeah, it doesn't have the same oomph and chutzpah that their previous albums did, for sure. but I don't think it's terrible. It may be awkward seeing them in this kind of suit, but it still fits them pretty well. They aren't terrible at a poppier sound. I gotta admit I wasn't expecting this though. Overall, the album isn't nearly as bad as some people are decrying it to be. This thing is getting downright crucified in some circles, and frankly, I don't think it deserves it. But hell, what I think doesn't really matter here, does it? I mean that more so than usual here. The fans rejected the shit out of this album, and the change in style didn't net them much in terms of new listeners, so regardless of what I think about this album, it's still pretty much overall a failure, and chances are they'll either go back to square one for the follow-up, or continue on this doomed path for another album and lose the rest of their goodwill. Ugh. Look, I wasn't as down on this album as most were. I say give it a try. It's not as bad if you keep an open mind about what this band can sound like, but I also know that this isn't the ideal career path these guys should be taking. As a one-off little experiment in twisting their sound, I can dig it, and if you walk into it with that approach, yeah, I think you'll warm up to it a little bit more yourself. But to be honest, as much as I'm okay with this album, I don't think I'd want any more of this sound. Another album of this just isn't gonna work. It's just not. But taken on its own merits and divorced from my usual expectations from this group, yeah, I thought it was okay. It's nothing to get upset over. It's not that bad. It isn't. Get out of my mentions. It's not. Gossip gets 3.5 gossips out of 5. No, this album wasn't the one that disappointed me. No. That album would actually be... God damn it, I wasted my I'm bored cutaway gag on Pacific Daydream, didn't I? Shit, that sucks because I can pretty much sum up my thoughts on this entire album in those 2 words. Is it okay if I just end the review there, actually? I'd love to get to the top billed album on this card. That would be much more fun to talk about. Can we skip it? No? Oh, fine then. I remember being really warm to Sonic Highways back when I reviewed it, but if you'll remember, that album did not show up on my Album of the Year list back in 2014. Well, the more I listened to it, the more I kind of fell out of love with it. It left a good first impression, but there wasn't a lot on that album that stuck around with me after I would put it down. Kinda ironic if you think about it. Foo Fighters were always one of those bands that was crazy good with a hook. They were masters at writing a simple but infectious melody that would stick to you for days, weeks, years. But as this band ages, they seem to slowly, progressively, almost sneakily forget how to do that. I think Wasting Light was the first place where we started to see this Foo amnesia start to settle in. Like, yeah, White Limo, Rope, Walk, they all kick ass, but that album had way more filler than I'm usually used to hearing on a Foo's album. And again, a lot of Sonic Highway left a good first impression. Something from Nothing, Feast in the Famine, Congregation, good stuff. But when that album doesn't hit, it really has a hard time getting your attention back. And on Concrete and Gold, I'd say the band are starting to come dangerously close to full-blown losing their identity. Again, the album isn't without its strong points. Hell, the 1-2 punch of T-Shirt and Run really make you excited for the ride you're about to take here, but then Make It Right tries to pull off a 70s Aerosmith-ish kind of vibe, and fails. The Sky is a Neighborhood goes for a Pink Floyd by way of Soundgarden vibe, but it fails. La-Di-Da, I don't even know what they were trying to do here, but it fails, and by that point, I just kinda completely disconnect from this album and lose every fuck I could give. I'm just gonna say it. The Foos have gotten way too bloated. I guess it made sense to officially add Pat Smear to the lineup back on Sonic Highways. I mean, he'd been touring with the guys for ages, and he basically always was a part of the Foos. They finally just made it official, but adding Rami Jaffe to the group and ballooning things into a 6-piece? It's starting to get way out of hand. The Foos could do grandiose and epic from time to time, but this band was really at its best when it was a lean, mean, hook-making machine. And this album? is the exact opposite of that. It has so much stuff on it that just isn't needed. Did you know Justin Timberlake is singing on Make It Right? I sure as hell didn't notice him. Did you know that Paul McCartney was playing drums on Sunday Rain? You know, that one song that tries to do 90s Beatles and fails? Yeah, Sir Paul is playing drums on that thing, and yeah, because that's what we all know and loved Paul for, his wicked tom skills. I think that my biggest problem with this album is that over the last few records, Foo Fighters have been forgetting how to be the Foo Fighters. And on this thing, they're aping so many other styles, so many other influences. They're taking so much other shit from other people that they barely sound like themselves. And this epic, mainstream, classic rock kick the guys have been on for the past few records has really worn out its welcome in my book. These guys desperately need to get back to basics. Concrete and Gold may sound like a hard name for an album, but make no mistake, this album is Rocky at the beginning of Rocky 3. Overconfident, old, out of shape, way too pampered, and if these guys aren't careful, I'm positive a good Clubber Lang will come along and knock them right the fuck out. And if these guys don't trim some fat soon, it's only gonna get worse as it goes along. These guys need to desperately call Apollo. Concrete and Gold gets 2.5 Carl Weathers out of 5. Well, I motherfucking told you guys to be on the lookout for these guys back in 2015. When I heard the Mind Sweep a couple of years back, I knew deep down that we would be hearing great stuff from these guys again, and sure enough, 2 years later, not only is their follow-up, The Spark, fucking transcendent, but it's blown away even the already high expectations I had for them. Like, people, not only is this an Album of the Year contender, this might be the Album of the Year contender, and I'm not even joking. Where to even start? Oh. Okay, how about this? This is one of those slightly rare times in rock music where a band taking elements out of their sound and stripping things down has served as a huge benefit as opposed to a loss. Yeah, I know, right? For all the times I gripe about bands sounding hollow or gimped out when they tone things down, this is an album that actually gets that idea correct. But then again, Enter Shikari was one of those bands that would have never hurt from scaling things back a tad. Their old sound was just so electronic, so overwhelming, so in your face with the beat boops that it could be a little much at times. If any band would have benefited from stripping down their sound a wee bit, it was these guys. But man, not only did they do it right, they did it excellently, above and beyond. Dave, you should be taking notes. It opens very humbly with The Spark, which bleeds into The Sights, a song that also starts small with lots of the more trademark style synth work, but once that pre-chorus starts to build and those crunchy ass thunderous guitars come in and punch you in the face, it gets going really good. Live Outside follows with a bit more of the same formula, but man, the electronic drums here are beautifully arranged. It feels like something straight out of Matt Tong's playbook, and now it has me missing the good version of Block Party really badly. Overall, I'd say this album has much more of a space rock kind of feel to it. The electronica is still the main crux of the music, but the edges of that style have been sanded down a bit to make way for much more ecstatic drumming and more sweeping, gnashing, heavy guitar work. The Revolt of the Atoms is an excellent little 4/4 floor stomper that sounds like something ripped straight out of a B-movie, or maybe a Tim Burton flick if it kicked way more ass. Rabble Rouser, with its sinister as fuck sounding riffs, sounds like it belongs in a heist movie or possibly a Kingsman sequel. And Take My Country Back, look, just listen to this track and tell me this is an Album of the Year material. Sweet singing Jesus. But I also really dig the slower vibes they put on this album. These guys lay out the crunch really well, but when songs like Airfield, Shinrin Yoku, and the sweeping, grandiose orchestral bliss that is an ode to lost jigsaw pieces, you realize full well the scary amount of flexibility and precision these guys have in making their music. Their arrangements are just scary good. This album shows Enter Shikari either entering or getting really, really close to their final form. They have absolutely nailed it here on The Spark. This album is spacey and bombast like, say, a 30 Seconds to Mars record, only filtered through the sophistication and sheer technical prowess of something more like Radiohead, while being generously garnished with the bouncier side of something like New Order, let's say, because keyboards, dog, keyboards! But guys, if you are even vaguely curious about this, yes, pick it up. One of my biggest parameters to help gauge whether or not an album is gonna get a top tier rating is how often I find myself wanting to respin it and when I find myself aching for that next spin. With this album, like, as soon as it was over, I was like, again! And as soon as that spin was over, I was like, again! And as soon as that spin was over, I was like, again! And you don't want to know how many times that went on for, people. Yeah, pick this up, and do not at all be surprised when you see this thing high on my Album of the Year list. The Spark gets 5 Undercover Agents out of 5.